Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Planning and Community Development Committee for Thursday, January 21st, 2021. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that the SCRD is located on the traditional territory of the Sea Shelton Squamish First Nations. Got a fairly short agenda for us today, but we do have a couple of delegations. So just before we adopt the agenda, I'm going to look to directors and staff to see if there's anything that needs to be added or changed on our agenda today. I am seeing no hands. So can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Okay, thank you very much. Before we move into our delegations, can I have a motion to receive all reports and communications, please? Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Our first delegation today, Nick Farrer, Director for Sea Shelton District Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Nick. You've got 10 minutes and we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Alton. I will share my screen, providing the technology allows. Are you getting that one?
Says that it started sharing. There we go. Yep.
Yeah, now I've got to start the PowerPoint. Here we go. How's that? Have you got that?
Sure do.
Yep. Okay, well, thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me today. Hi, directors. My name is Nick Farrer. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of the Sea Shelton and District Chamber of Commerce, its board, and of course its members, particularly about short-term rentals. I do want to add right at the end a couple of minutes about water. We've been seeking to speak as a delegation for many months now, and about STRs, and now being allowed to speak in January. Maybe we are too late, but we hope that we can open up the discussion about short-term rentals again. As you know, on October the 8th last year, the SCRD adopted zoning bylaw amendments that severely changed specifically how short-term rentals on the Sunshine Coast inside the SCRD can operate. Just want to let it be known that none of the board of the directors of the chamber have short-term rentals. So we speak on behalf of our members and their vested interests. Let me begin by saying that we acknowledge there are some, but few, short-term rentals on the coast that do present problems. The chamber naturally empathizes with the neighbors of these homes. Nobody should have to live next door to continual noise and parties. Some changes do certainly need to be made. However, it is our members and the board's conclusive opinion that the SCRD has not taken enough time and due diligence to make this bylaw amendment, and it will severely affect businesses on the coast for many years to come. With the economic effect on the coast that this causes, what economic impact study did the SCRD conduct to fully understand the negative result of the bylaws on the tourism industry that is one of the biggest economic drivers in our community? The gravitas of this decision should have initiated research that gave empirical data to make an informed decision. In 2020, the Squamish Chamber of Commerce, which represents a similar population number to the Sunshine Coast, calculated the bylaws would result in over $18 million lost in direct spending to residents owners, and between $6 to $9 million lost in tourist spending each year into local businesses. Sunshine Coast Tourism has been running a variety of statistical programs, and in one quick conversation with them that I had, I gathered lots of useful information. Since October 2018, short-term rentals, which they define as 3 rooms or less, were legislated by the province to collect PST and MRDT. This contributed $8 million in room revenues in 2019. And traditional room revenues, which are 4 or more rooms, topped $20 million for the first time on the coast. This is income we cannot ignore as an economic driver. The Sunshine Coast has developed from a resource-based economy to an economy heavily dependent on tourism. With few alternative accommodations for tourists, these bylaw changes will stop tourists coming to the Sunshine Coast. Tourists cannot stay here, they will go elsewhere. However, tourists probably will still come to use the same Airbnbs and short-term rentals as before, because the truth is that with the new bylaws, short-term rentals will just be driven underground and continue to operate as before. They will take the fines, which we acknowledge have been upped by the SCRD. They will just incorporate them into their fees or move to different technological platforms. Airbnb is now a technological service that is ingrained in our culture. People use this across the world. Why is the SCRD trying to restrict part of a service that will inevitably continue, rather than put energies into noise and antisocial behavior enforcement, being the waste of time and energy? With enforcement, many of your new STR bylaws seem to be unenforceable. How will you actively limit the number of people per room? The number of bedrooms that are allowed? Will there be a bylaw officer trawling Airbnb, checking every single listing on the Sunshine Coast? Enforcement is essential, but only when it's used in the correct way. And we believe there are already effective, enforceable bylaws that can prevent many of these infractions. There is a housing crisis on the Sunshine Coast, and the Sea-Shelt Chamber acknowledges that the SCRD have tried to remedy this by implementing some of these rules. However, the changes seem to be the wrong way around. Our members have described in depth how there's an enormous shortage of housing for their staff on lower incomes, looking for mostly 1 or 2 bedroom suites or apartments. I myself, as an employer, had an employee who used to take the bus all the way from Langdale to West Sea-Shelt, because the only 1 bedroom suite she could afford was in Langdale. And so by banning larger properties, more people will be driven to use suites, cottages, and apartments, reducing the inventory of affordable lower cost housing for lower income residents. Conversely, how many families on the coast can actually afford a 6 bedroom house at $5,000 a month? Hardly any. These homes you're banning will not be placed into the long-term rental inventory. They will just sit empty. So you're banning the houses that then won't be used for long-term rentals and encouraging tourists to use similar accommodation that is vital to the working population here. When COVID restrictions finally ease, we want businesses on the coast to take advantage. People will want to travel here and spend their money. And what does it say about our community when we are saying you are not welcome in large groups? I personally have had 2 separate, non-related groups of friends who both expressed interest in buying property on the Sunshine Coast to initially Airbnb it with a view to moving here long term. The SCRD bylaw changes have made both groups now buy property elsewhere, not on the Sunshine Coast. And they speak with disappointment that the Sunshine Coast does not seem to want them. I do hope I've put over how important this subject is to Sunshine Coast businesses and how they'll be so negatively affected by this bylaw. And so to this end, the Sea-Shelt Chamber does propose that the SCRD introduce business licensing for all STRs to operate. Use the money generated from that licensing and the tax revenue from the MRDT to fund effective enforcement. And that, of course, includes weekends and evenings. Most of the problems that do occur are on weekends, Saturday nights. And of course, our enforcement isn't around at that time. So we need enforcement across all times, not just a Wednesday afternoon. Please reconsider the October decision and amend the new bylaw again and allow all types of accommodation size, increasing our inventory across the coast, providing that they abide by all noise and antisocial behavior rules. And just a couple of minutes on water supply. The Sea-Shelt Chamber notes that the SCRD will be implementing water leak detection. This was championed by the Chamber back in January last year. We acknowledge the efforts being made by the SCRD in this area to use such a cost-effective water-saving resource. The costs quoted by the SCRD are $40,000 for equipment and $150,000 for staff labor. Has the SCRD considered using the leak detection experts themselves to conduct this work on a contract basis, rather than putting $190,000 taxpayer money into staffing them themselves? And has the SCRD costed this out, a third-party contract versus staffing it themselves? The Chamber believes that a third-party contractor with expertise may be a more cost-effective method with greater, more tangible results. That's it from me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Nick. If we can just get you to stop the screen share.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Directors, any questions, comments for our delegation? Director McMahon.
Yeah, I feel that I do have to point out that the bylaw that we passed in October does not change the situation. Short-term rentals without resident owners were illegal in the first place. We merely confirmed this direction. I could say a lot about this, but I get a lot of complaints in my area about short-term rentals without a resident host. And I've only had one person who runs an STR approach me, and they were a resident host. So, you know, the vast majority of concerns I hear are from residents. If we allow STRs in residential areas, we are basically making a mockery of our own zoning, because residential means you live there. And STRs that operate in these rural areas are not licensed, they are not inspected, and they are not paying commercial property taxes. And that's not a level playing field for the hotel industry. So I think the way to go is to support our hotel industry, because arguably, yes, we do need more accommodation on the Sunshine Coast, and that would be a good thing for the local economy. I'll finally say that most of the real problems that we have are with STRs that are owned by off-coast owners. And that money, those $20 million or whatever it is going off-coast. It's not here. It's going to owners who are not living on the Sunshine Coast, and in many cases are not even living in this province or in this country. So I think that we need to support local businesses that are rooted here in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
And if I could come back to Director McMahon on that, there's part of that I couldn't agree more, or we couldn't agree more with. Obviously, we represent the businesses inside the Seashore district. And first and foremost, we want to see more hotels, but of course there is a paucity of those hotels. So Airbnb and others are effectively filling that gap right now. I think if we were to see more hotels accommodation, then we would see Airbnb be used less. So yeah, we absolutely agree with that. I'd be interested to hear where the data came from about how many STR owners are from off coast, or whether that's just come from sites.
One thing you mentioned in your presentation was business licensing, and
Yeah.
I know that that's something that this board has discussed, and I believe our CAO will be bringing back a report soon regarding business licensing and looking at other regional districts that have done it. It's not a power that the regional district has automatically like a municipality does. It is something that requires some provincial intervention to put into place. So I'm not sure.
Know, yeah. As effective is, and I do agree with Director McMahon in that it's effectively an unregulated industry. and it does need a form of regulation, be it if it happened to be by municipalities or districts. And so, yeah, our proposition is absolutely for a more stringent process, but we want to keep those tourism dollars coming into the coast.
Yeah. Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. The phrase "large home" is what I'm kind of looking for some details on. Like, we have 2-bedroom B&Bs, on-site operator, can be managed by any of the platforms that are out there. Sunshine Coast Tourism talks about 3 rooms or less, and then we have this large home. And I'm looking if you could, like, I'm wondering, is there anyone that knows actually the distribution of 2 bedrooms versus 3 bedrooms versus large home, and how many bedrooms do you consider to be a large home? How many bedrooms could be in a large home? And do you have any, like, does the chamber collect any data? Have you seen any data about that distribution between a not a large home and these other sizes?
Yeah, I haven't seen any direct data. Of course, the bylaw talks about the definition between a short-term rental and a bed and breakfast, and which I believe is defined by bedrooms. I did try and see if Sunshine Coast Tourism did have any data on the split between those. They have been working on some statistical work that is effectively just looking at how many short-term rentals are on the coast at the moment. I don't know what they're talking about between sizing, but they said there's over 1,200 on the coast right now.
Director Hiltz, follow up.
So what would be the chamber's definition of a large home? Then, like, how many people could possibly book into a large home?
Well, I mean, this is me kind of trying to speak on behalf of the board. We haven't discussed, but I think you would imagine that 4 bedrooms and above would be a large home.
All right, thank you. Director Beamish.
Thank you for your presentation too, Nick. You know, I'm from Gibson's area here. We have not addressed. We've addressed it, but we have not resolved our short-term rental concerns up here. One question, you seem to be under the impression that the short-term rental tax could be used for enforcement. This is I assume you're talking about the tourism tax. It does not come to us. It goes strictly to tourism. It does not, so we do not have that as a revenue for the enforcement purposes. For costs. I guess my big concern with short, and look, I welcome short-term rentals as a business in our community. I think it's important. I think it's part of what makes our community unique. But I also welcome those in housing that is occupied by residents. I can walk down my street and see the empty homes that exist. I can see between those empty homes, houses with children, but nobody to play with next door because, hey, it's a short-term rental. We're only open on weekends. We don't have anybody around. They don't go to school. They don't shop in the stores. And so that, or when they do come over, they are strangers. And so they're not part of that neighborhood commitment of people. And that's a concern to me. You know, that I want people who live in the community to be part of the community, to build our community. And I've lived in Masset. I don't know if you've ever been to Masset. Years ago, Masset was an army base. When the people moved out of Masset, when they shut the base down, they had a bunch of open, empty houses, the majority of which were bought by people off of Haida Gwaii, living in Houston, Terrace, Prince Rupert, and used for short-term rentals or for fishing accommodation in the summertime. Commercial businesses closed down because they gutted the community. They were not permanent residents. And so they did not have that opportunity. So I strongly support a strong short-term rental industry in our community. I do not support empty homes. I do not support people from off coast using short-term rentals as a way to increase their wealth by buying homes on the Sunshine Coast. They go up in price and then they turn around and sell them for more money. I mean, that's not that's a great way to make money, but it's not the way to build community. And so that's where I stand on that. I will have my say with our council on that issue. I do not support even local residents buying homes, keeping them empty for short-term rentals. I want occupied short-term rentals. And I think that's really important from a community perspective. I want neighbors. Right now I have one on one side and none on the other side of me. So and that's interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Director Beamish. And yeah, certainly in Seashell, you know, we're very, very early days on looking at short-term rentals and trying to figure out the path forward, because there is a whole range of path forward on it. You know, we get emails several a week from residents complaining about their you know, the short-term rentals, the problem homes. Obviously, you don't hear about the ones that aren't problem homes. You don't know how many are necessarily in a neighborhood, but if they're run effectively and quietly. But Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair Toth. Thank you, Nick, for the presentation from the chamber. It is important to note that and I'm going to speak from my experience as having worked in the tourism industry on the coast for a number of years, and having actually also been on the board of Sunshine Coast Tourism. So I am fully well aware of the history of the bed and breakfast industry on the Sunshine Coast and what that has meant to the coast as a whole and to property owners and the tourism industry. The rise of technology, the sudden which led on to online booking systems such as Booking.com, Airbnb, has lent itself to the largest hotel chain in the world being virtual and not owning any property. So, and our, you know, it's certainly it's something that the SCRD has struggled with for a number of years within its zoning, because I think this short-term rental amendment, when was it first introduced? I would think 2014, around that time, GM Hall probably, that the short-term rental was first introduced into the zoning bylaw. So it was a long time coming to get to any kind of resolution around, and I will tell you, I know from talking to the directors that we grappled with it quite a bit, and we knew it wasn't perfect the way it was passed, and we still have thoughts on how it may change. However, at the end of the day, as Director McMahon had stated, it's the STR adjustments that we made to our bylaw last year are still in concert with our zoning bylaws. It has never been allowed to have an off-site operator for a bed and breakfast facility, which was the precursor to the short-term rental. So it has been problematic, and I look within my own community of Half Moon Bay and along Red Roofs Road in the Welcome Woods area, we have there was one time I checked, and I think it was October, there were 90 listings. And that's a significant amount for our community of the properties we have in that one area. And I hear about it all the time. And are there changes that we could make? Certainly. But the way it is right now, I'm reasonably happy with. There's potentially some adjustments. As I said, this is a rural planning issue. So I welcome the Seashell Chamber and District Chamber's comments on it. I do think that the bricks and mortar hotels do need to be supported, having been within that industry. We certainly do still allow short-term rentals with an on-site operator. And with not doing business licenses currently at the regional district, we have no mechanism at this time for regulating. And the data around the number of short-term rentals, I can tell you, is really difficult to come by. And I know that in my current profession as a real estate agent, you know, there's a lot of them that are operating on the coast that you would never know about and aren't problem rentals. But also at the same time, it's outside of the bylaw, and it is in contravention of the bylaw. And we do have concerns about that, because it does change the fabric of a community when you have a commercial entity that is operating within a residential area.
I think, coming from speaking on behalf of the chamber, I think probably agree with almost everything you say there. We're obviously representing businesses inside our district, and we want to ensure that those bed and breakfast businesses, hotel businesses are still frequented, but also at the same time we want to draw to ensure that those tourism dollars are still coming into our area. And because of the paucity of hotels and bed and breakfasts, or traditional bed and breakfasts, people are coming in using short-term rentals. So we want to ensure those tourism dollars still come in, and yet at the same time we still want to ensure that we have that feeling of community. So we understand it's a very difficult process, and we just ask that the SCRD just review those bylaws, or review any potential amendment for the future.
Well, and Chair Toth, if I may.
Yep.
Because it was essentially running like the Wild West, if we need to course correct, that's okay. Sometimes you need to let the pendulum swing one full way and see how it goes before we find that balance of what's working best for our community. And the Sunshine Coast, it has a long history of second homes, of vacation rentals, and but when we're getting to the point where our community members that are living here are not having any reasonable quality of life within their own homes that they've invested heavily in, we need to look at that, and we needed to act on that. So we're in a place, and if we need to course correct, we will course correct. So we certainly welcome, the comments and the advocacy, Mr. Farrer, and appreciate the Chamber's views on that. And we're continuing to watch it and listen to our community on it as well.
Thank you, Director Pratt. Director Ties.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. One is that thanks for the presentation, first of all. And then I do agree that the bedroom limit is something that's difficult to police and enforce, and I don't think we found an optimal solution there yet. I think, as Director Pratt said, this is a work in progress, and I think we may need to look at it in the future. Right now, we're at a certain place where I think we're okay with it, but at the same time, there is avenues for people who do want to have large homes and rent them out on short-term rental, and that is to rezone. They can apply for a rezoning, and that is always an option, and that would solve all of the problems, because then we would be able to take in commercial property tax rates. The discourse with the community would be there, and so that option is always open. But to run a commercial business out of a residential area without the proper zoning in place, and the law, there was a lawsuit in the District of Nanaimo that did determine that without having somebody present on site, it is a commercial enterprise that they're doing, and so that is, to me, the biggest issue. And I think, if you really want to run a business there and you think you can do it, then do a rezoning application.
Thank you, Director Ties. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair Toth. And thank you for the presentation. It's interesting. I have one question, and that is, you suggested we amend the bylaw to allow all types of accommodation. What would that amendment look like? And what other types were you thinking of including?
Well, it would be amending to allow all properties without someone on site, and to allow larger properties that don't necessarily fall into the bed and breakfast definition.
Okay, thank you.
Director Lee. All right. Any last questions from directors? Director Hiltz?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm interested, Nick, about this discussion about commercial in a residential opposed to a B&B, which is an ancillary. It's supposed to be supplemental. It's not supposed to be the driving. So how do you see that kind of piece working in a residential neighborhood where it's a commercial in a residential and it's not supplementary to the kind of residential use? How do you kind of see that?
It's very difficult. It's an incredibly difficult situation, isn't it? We, as I said before, I think the Chamber's viewpoint is that short-term rentals are needed for bringing in tourism dollars to the coast, but it isn't the long-term solution. The long-term solution is to have better hotels, formal B&Bs, which will reduce that inventory of Airbnbs. I think long term that will solve a lot of the problem. It's a supply and demand situation right now. But I'm afraid I have to go back to the board, and we'll come back to you with an answer for your direct question.
All right. Thank you. Director McMahon.
Right. I just wanted to build on Director Hiltz's comment on ancillary uses. Lots and lots of people in the rural areas run businesses from home, sometimes several businesses, but as long as they live there, that's usually not a problem because the primary use of their residence is still residential. And the ancillary uses, and of course, more and more people are working from home, which is a shift I think that will continue. And more people need mortgage helpers, frankly, because the mortgages have gotten so much bigger. So all these things will work, I think, as long as people are living here and being good neighbors to each other. I think we can all make it work, and it's part of our economy. So we're looking at various options. We will look at business licenses. I suspect that there are real challenges to trying to do business licenses in a regional district, and it would have to pay for itself, right? Because otherwise, then it just increases the cost to everybody. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Director McMahon. All right. I don't see any further hands up. Thank you, Nick, for being here today. And I see several members of the chamber in the attendees list. Director Ties, is that a hand up or a wave goodbye?
Yeah, just a quick question. Does staff want to comment on the water issue, or is that not part of what the delegation was here for?
GM Hall?
Thank you for the question, Chair. We don't have infrastructure staff in the meeting with us today, and thank you.
I believe the leak correlator will be coming up as part of round one budget, which is scheduled for the 1st and 2nd of February. So, I'm sure directors have taken note of the question there, and we will see what the budget proposal looks like, and if pertinent, I'm sure somebody will ask that question. So, yeah, thank you for coming today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, and I really appreciate the feedback.
All right. So our next delegation is Dawn Cunliffe from the Half Moon Bay Community Association. And while we wait for him to be brought in, I see he's here. Good morning, Don. You should be able to unmute and turn your camera on and all that. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. You've got 10 minutes. It's all you.
Okay, I'm Don Cunliffe from the Half Moon Bay Community Association. I'm a director and the chair of the fundraising committee, and I'd like to share the screen if I'm able to, please.
Should be able to do that on your end.
It's not. Click on the right one.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Only in Half Moon Bay do we spell hall with 3 L's. Sorry about that. Just before I get started, 2 of my committee members may be sitting in on this, and they are Terry Knight, who's the president of the association, and Brian Smith, who has been helping out in many ways, particularly with grant applications and whatnot. Thank you for allowing me to present my material today. This is an important project for many people, not only in Half Moon Bay, for along the Sunshine Coast as well. There's much literature, just before I start, there's much literature about halls, particularly on what I call placemaking. And there's one phrase that I think is very important for us to all think about, and that's the phrase, a tangible asset that binds and strengthens our attachment to the area we live in. That's proved to be very, very true and very strong with respect to Cooper's Green Hall that I have seen and lived in this area for many years. So just moving forward, let's talk about the hall itself and why at Cooper's Green. This has been a gathering spot and a recreational area for probably more than 100 years. It's had 3 halls at this location. The current hall was there when SCRD purchased the property in 1985 for the huge sum of $260,000 at the time. It has been a revenue generator to some extent, but with the poor quality of the current hall and the lack of a food-safe commercial kitchen, that has been an issue. Our community has been using it since we sold our hall many years back, and we have had sold-out concerts over that period of time for a very significant amount. And we believe that with the new hall, the proposed new hall that is, a larger in size, it would be certainly a revenue generator, particularly for large family gatherings, weddings, and whatnot. So there is a big advantage to the new hall from that aspect. It currently is on the property, and the hall are on a public transportation route, which makes a lot of sense. There's been some talk about potentially looking at Connor Park, which is in the neighborhood of Welcome Woods area on the urban interface and not on a transportation route. So those are some drawbacks to alternate locations. It's centrally located in Area B district. Area B district runs from Wood Bay, just north of, as you may know, just north of Secret Cove, down to Sergeant Bay. If you take the population of Half Moon Bay, the coastal population, certainly it is very central, probably within a kilometer or so. So people coming from both areas, from the Sergeant's Bay, Welcome Woods area, and down from Secret Cove would find that the Cooper's Green Hall is accessible largely about the same distances. In support of the replacement of the hall, donations are for and expected to be placed for a hall at Cooper's Green. If you take our donations form, if you take the tax relief form, if you take the grant application, they all mention a hall at Cooper's Green Park. Just moving on, I'll scroll down here. This is support. The hall has been supported over years by starting with the management plan, which was developed about 5 years ago. And it had a couple of features in it. The most important feature is the hall itself, upgrade to the hall with a commercial level kitchen. That was the primary rationale in the park management plan, among other things. Also, it basically said that 61% input came from people who wanted the hall to be sited where the current hall is. And 32% said, well, it probably could be on the back corner, which would require a different design than the current proposed one is. A community-based task force joined by Keith Julius from the Seashell Nation spent probably just over a year. I was a member of the task force, as were 5 other members from the community, confirming the results of the requirements and moving forward to help the architect, Craig Burns, with the current design that exists today, which included an open house completing the process that was taken advantage there. Many small businesses in Half Moon Bay, in fact, 8 have been donors or potential in-kind businesses that could help with the hall. So we've got small business support to some level. We've got letters from editors, and probably more than we would like to count on, but there's been at least a dozen in the past month supporting moving forward with the hall. We have the once in time, as I call it, grant from the Canada program, both federal and provincial, for $2 million+. And in addition to that, we've had donors from the Wood Bay area, north of Secret Cove, right down to Sergeant's Bay. 158 donations have come in probably the last 2 years. It really started with the application to the grant, so people were very motivated to thinking that this hall is going to be a reality at some point in time. And those 158 donors, along with the seed money from the Half Moon Bay Community Association, have provided currently $345,000. This, along with the community amenities, largely from the independent power projects in our region, currently have given the SCRD about 83% of the funding for the new hall. That is a substantial amount in my mind, and starts to close the unfunded gap that will have to be addressed by the SCRD. Finally, in support, we've got Ryan Daly from the fire chief at the hall here in Half Moon Bay, saying that he is very much behind this and would support fundraising once the hall is in plan. Healthcare Auxiliary, the Half Moon Bay Healthcare Auxiliary, who are a major user of the hall and support our Half Moon Bay Fair activities here, are also a donor and a supporter, along with the Sunshine Coast Credit Union, who have made 2 large donations to date.
2 minutes left.
Just moving on, the work completed. The hall and siting were confirmed largely in the park management plan. The site was determined by the task force, and it incorporates the ability to give us a wide range of programming. Parking requirements required by the amount of square footage and the number of people in the hall have been approved. Variance setbacks have been approved. And the construction floor level, based on ocean flooding, which incorporates sea level rise, wave run up and whatnot, has determined that the hall would have to be 2 feet above the current level, which is about 2 meters above high water. Half Moon Bay is rather unique in that area in that the large winds are from the southeast and they blow over the hall where the little bay is, unlike you would have at, say, Roberts Creek or West Seashell, where you get very large waves and very, very large run-up. The result of all that work was that the design development by Principal Architecture has been done and it is complete. And in addition to that, we have confirmed our interest as an association to explore with the SCRD a cooperative arrangement to run the hall. This could certainly help with the ongoing operational expenses. Just to complete my presentation, I've taken the liberty to talk about what I see as next steps. Starting a week today, the design team will be conducting, I call the next phase review, which is an outreach again to our community in terms of the requirements of the hall. I anticipate, and as a result of that, we expect that this will meet in time for the round 2 of the budget. And at that time, we could get back on fundraising, which has been hit the pause button recently because of the situation with regard to delaying the activities of the hall. So once that gets announced, we can continue fundraising and seek in-kind donations, which we believe there's a large number out there. And the design team could complete the construction level drawings. As a member of the task force, that was the immediate next step that Craig Burns from Principal Architecture would take on. And we think that there's about a 3 to 4 week effort there. SCRD then could prepare for startup and management of the project. And as any project of this size, it needs a celebration and fundraising event with shovels in the ground. And I think that would be a big opportunity again to promote our hall and get more funds to decrease the unfunded funded gap. That's pretty well all I have to say today. Hopefully there may be some questions.
All right. Thank you, Don. If we can get you to stop your screen share.
Okay. I'll just find where that button is.
As Director McMahon puts it, we'll go back to Hollywood Squares mode.
Okay.
Should be
square at the top.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
I'm going to let Director Pratt speak first, but just before she goes, I did want to commend your group on raising $345,000 already towards this project. That is no small feat, and yeah, thank you for your presentation. So, Director Pratt.
Hi. Thank you, Chair Toth. Thank you, Don, for the presentation, and I'm glad that we were able to finally get you on an agenda to present to the directors. And so to the directors, I'd really encourage you to ask Don any questions. He was also the chair of the task force, so he is highly well versed in this project and can answer any of the concerns that you may have or any questions that you may have. So thank you very much, Don.
Thank you.
Director Ties.
Hi, yeah, thank you for your presentation. And yes, I do commend you on the amount of fundraising that's been done. It's amazing. I would love to see a community hall built for the right reasons in the right place. The question I have is, you mentioned that sea level rise has been incorporated, and I'm wondering to what time frame that sea level rise has been incorporated into the plans. And the other question I have is around the fact that we're now in a pandemic and how whether the task force has considered any kind of changes to the building regarding HVAC, regarding those kind of contingencies. Thank you.
Just real quick, Don, before you address any questions, I do see GM Hall has put his hand up, so I wanted to ask staff first what's up.
Thank you, Chair. I would just note that as Don pointed out, we do have a a public engagement session coming next week, and staff are prepared to speak to the technical details of the flood construction, because we have heard that come up as a question, and I'll take the heat off of our delegation to speak to the fine-grained details of how flood construction level is calculated. And on the latter point, staff would just note that the task force has been concluded, but with regard to changes to design driven by our current context, be it pandemic, new building code, et cetera, again, that will be dealt with in the session coming next week. Thank you.
Thank you, GM Hall. Don, was there anything that you wanted to add to that, or?
Just clarification, actually, I was not the chair of the task force. Ian Hall and one of his staff were looking after that. I spent a major part of my time on the task force and became somewhat of an expert. It's a little dangerous to say that on ocean flooding, because I didn't like what came back from the geotech company. And I spent some time figuring out about what ocean flooding was all about and the elements that go into it. And so I think that, as Ian Hall has mentioned, this will all get looked after in the ensuing time here with the work that Craig Burns is going to carry on with.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Great. Hi. I am going to save all my picky questions for the public information meeting, which is already in my day timer, because you know, we are relatively new at the SCRD and have not been through this entire process. I'm just going to say that I feel it's really important that if we are building new buildings at this point, that we get it right. There were a lot of issues with the construction of the rec center in Gibsons and the pool in Sechelt that continue to affect us, because I think they were not designed well enough with the future in mind, and they did not incorporate enough green building features that should have been done. But, you know, it was kind of rushed through, and it was also during a building boom, which saw costs skyrocket. So I feel that we have to be very cautious when we're going into this to make sure that we are getting the best possible and most versatile possible building out of it, and one that will last. You know, an asset that can be maintained for many, many decades to come. I do not like to see us throw up things in a hurry or put in programs in a hurry that don't have that component of you know, long-term value. That's what we got to look at, our long-term value to the community. So I just wanted to express that we want to get it right. If we're going to do it, we got to do it right.
Thank you, Director McMahon. You know, it's interesting because, you know, Cooper's Green Hall has been built and rebuilt a couple of times in that present location already in the 100 years that it's been there. But, you know, on the other end of the coast, Grantham's Landing, you know, that hall, yes, it was almost lost due to reaching a derelict status, but that building is 100 years old, over 100 years old. And yeah, certainly, you know, it depends on how it's built, when it's built, who builds it. So Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Don. Yeah, for me, it's like the right design, the right location, and at the right time. So part of that equation in your presentation, you mentioned the revenue generation aspect of the location. And I'm interested to know how the community sees the location and the revenue generation come together to solve that kind of right time, right location, right design.
Thank you for your question. I think that's a very important aspect here. I mean, there's been a lot of focus on cost, but the other side of the ledger is revenue. And to be honest, I think we didn't spend or haven't spent enough time on that, but we do know from a programming aspect, with a hall that has a main floor area about twice the size of the current one, it would provide a nice facility for, let's start with weddings. We looked at the optimum wedding size, the average wedding size in British Columbia and in Canada, and it turns out it's 120 people sit down for dinner. We looked at other potential ideas in terms of what has gone on at the hall and what were performed over the last probably 5 years or more. And if you look at celebrations of life, celebrations of parties, of birthdays, of weddings and whatever, that size of hall that's proposed is fairly optimum from that standpoint. So we would do, the revenue generation would be from a lot more than just the major applications that have been taken on in the last while. In other words, most of them have been meetings. There's been some other events held there, but the hall does not have the size or the capacity, nor a food safe kitchen of a commercial nature that would support those kind of events. We just know that a waterfront location from a standpoint of celebrations and weddings is a big draw. In fact, if you take what are the competitors on the coast, such as the Rockwaters of the world, I think it was only a couple of years ago, there was 46 or 47 weddings that were held there at that facility. There's potential for that kind of business. And when you talk about, to most people, they love to come to the waterfront and look out over and see the sunsets at Half Moon Bay. And that would be a big drawing card, not only just for the community of Half Moon Bay, but for the whole coast.
Follow up?
So you mentioned I'm going to call it the business case for this, and you mentioned competitors, commercial competitors. So has that been part of the design process, the kind of operating cost, revenue generation business case for this location? Is that happened?
I'll have to let Ian Hall jump in on this one. Certainly from a task force standpoint and beforehand, we visited the Botanical Garden Society and talked to those folks about the usage of their hall. It's about the same, plan would be about the same size. Their hall would seat just slightly less than the 120 from a competitive nature. So we looked at that. I've spoken with Rockwater people, but that's a different kind of facility than that we're proposing here. That's a hotel-oriented facility. So to answer your question, Mark, is no, there hasn't, to my knowledge, no, there hasn't been a what I would call a formal business case done. In the task force in the prior times, we did look at potential, as I've just said, competitors and whatnot. So I don't know whether Ian can jump in on this one or wishes to or not.
GM Hall?
Thank you, Chair. I would, there was a thorough review of past revenue and comparison revenue from other SCRD sites. It was used to look at the potential future revenue of a new hall. And there was a comparison done between a new hall of a larger size and other facilities on the coast. And I'll say that it was carefully worked over by the task force, and there was not agreement necessarily on the preferred size, but the design that was put forward, and again, this is in scope and will be worked through next week as part of the plan session. The design that we'll be discussing next week is it's quite similar to the existing hall in terms of its function and scale, and is decidedly not on the scale of larger hotels, conference centers, etc. It remains a community hall. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Directors, any other questions, comments? Otherwise, we will say thank you again to Don and the Half Moon Bay Community Association for presenting to us today. And sounds like many of us will be there next week, looking at the chatter, people asking about dates and times for this event. So we will see you later. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you for the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Bye now. All right. Moving on to Annex B, the renewal of the Memorandum of Understanding with Half Moon Bay Community Association for Cooper's Green Hall. Turn this over to GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair Toth. So as our delegation just mentioned, the Half Moon Bay Community Association has been an effective fundraising partner for a hall replacement project. And that work is done in partnership with the SCRD and is guided by a formal MOU. And we've benefited from that for 6 years. And now we're at the end of a term and it's time to renew it. So staff recommend that it be renewed with the terms as is for a further 5 years, which covers off the potential entire term of designing, building, and commissioning a new hall. And so in the report that's in front of the committee, there is a copy of the agreement attached. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Directors, any questions, comments? Moving of recommendations if you're not hearing any or having any comments. Director Pratt.
I would be happy to move the recommendations on page 9.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? I have seconders. This is voting A, B, D, E, and F. Last call for questions. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex C, Dakota Ridge Snow Clearing and Road Maintenance Services Contract Update. Mr. Adams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Toth. The SCRD currently has a 3-year contract with NB Contracting to maintain the unpaved Forest Service Road just above the SCRD offices there, which provides access to the Dakota Ridge Winter Recreation Area. The contract is for important snow clearing and road maintenance of this 13.5 kilometer gravel road system, which accesses the winter recreation facility, where local residents have recently been coming in record numbers for cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, and sledding. This has resulted in increased revenues. At the same time, snow conditions, the requirements of plowing, and road maintenance costs are difficult to predict year over year. This is due to inconsistency of weather, levels of usage, and associated road conditions. The purpose of this report is administrative, in order to amend the SCRD contract with NB Contracting to align both with the work that NB has completed and service that is anticipated to be required until the end of the 3-year contract in November of this year. The updated contract value is proposed to be up to $240,000 from the original contract value of $195,000. Also, beyond 2021, staff recommend exercising the contract extension option for an additional 2 years of up to $80,000 per year, which includes a snow contingency. No budget amendment is required at this current time based on a maximum annual road service budget of $80,000. Staff will continue to monitor the snow plowing and road maintenance and revenues and return to committee with options should a future budget amendment be a consideration. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Directors. Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. I see in the contract it says there it's on an as-needed basis. Now that seems to be a bit of a gray area. Are there some parameters set as to what as-needed means, or is it sort of solely at the discretion of the operator? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Chair.
Yep.
It's when there's 4 inches of snow or more that's what triggers a snow plowing session. Generally, unless there's some type of circumstance where the sides need to be cleared out. And for maintenance, that is we have a road engineer that comes in and makes prescriptions for the maintenance.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I understand there's active logging up beyond Dakota Ridge this winter, so the logging trucks are using the road. And I was wondering whether that has either a positive or a negative impact on our snow clearing, and are we doing snow clearing for logging companies?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Does it have, so I don't believe that we're doing snow clearing for the logging company. If those trucks are coming off of around 9 kilometer. So most of the snow happens up high. And they also have their own machines. They gave the road a grade before they started out there. And what was the other part of that question?
I just wanted to know if it had either a negative or a positive impact on our road. Like
Yeah, so that's difficult to say. It is an industrial road, it's hard to say what, who's doing the any type of erosion to the road, whether it's the logging companies or users, other users.
Thank you. And you did mention that they did do at least one grade in there as well. So they are contributing to the maintenance of the road. GM Hall, did I see your hand go up there?
Just to reinforce the point you just made, Chair, that all users of provincial roads have responsibilities, and that on rare occasions in the past, and I'm not aware of any in this year, maybe not even the year prior, where there have been condition issues caused by a particular user, the ministry has been responsive in terms of guiding those users to appropriate maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it's generally in the logging company's best interests to have a maintained road because it's their equipment traveling on it. So, Director Hiltz.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to keep going on the service level for these 13.5K of road. So just to clarify, it starts at the top of Field Road where the pavement ends, and that's there is a name for that Forest Service Road, Husden Creek Forest Service Road, I think is what it's called. And the timing, it says in the report that the contractor does summer maintenance. And in terms of the timing of these operations, if thinking you're going into a snow year, you would probably want to make sure that the road is in the absolutely top condition before the snow flies. So, and I'm wondering about is the users of this road, who pays for them, and is Dakota Ridge intended as a winter only summer recreation or a year-round recreation in terms of the service as it was developed? So I'm just there are some residential properties further along, so that is also contributing to the service of those areas. It's a unmaintained provincial road. So that's kind of what I'm interested in.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So to answer the question about the bottom 0.5 kilometers, that's kind of within the district of Sechelt, and there are some residences down there. And we would only plow that if it snowed heavily there. Otherwise, that is maintained by forestry and or the district of Sechelt. Up above there, we do maintenance, and yes, we try and get the maintenance done before the rain first and then the snow flies on a yearly basis on that upper part. And the third part of that is that whomever is using the road at the time needs to do some maintenance on it. So that could be us, or it could be a variety of industrial users.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
So that road is a shared responsibility, and the coordination lies with the province, I suppose. And so I'm thinking of the contribution that the taxpayers make, which I'm looking at the cost recovery of the service. And for simplicity's sake, I looked at the 2024 financial plan. You got 26,000 revenue, $210,000 of tax revenue, which is about a 12% recovery. I'm just, is that a reasonable way to understand this, that this service is a 12% recovery in terms of revenue generation? I'm just trying to, I keep hearing as a director that we need to focus on cost recoveries as a way to measure service level delivery. So is 12% a ballpark cost recovery for this function?
That's a big question on a road maintenance services contract update, Director Hiltz. But
it is.
If staff want to try and approach that now, they're welcome to.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say, as far as I know, that is correct. But I would add to that we have a budget proposal coming to round one to reduce the subsidy slightly because of the recent strong revenues up on Dakota, and this would affect an increase in recovery.
Great, thank you very much. Directors, any other questions? I see no further hands. Would somebody like to move some recommendations for me? This is voting all. Director Pratt.
I will move the recommendations as presented on page 17, please.
Thank you. And I have a seconder. Great. I see no further questions, so I will call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Adams, for being here. Moving on to Annex D, New Brighton Dock, SCRD work in 2021. And turn this over to GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. As directed by the board, staff completed research related to possible next steps on the New Brighton Dock on the southwest peninsula of Gambier Island. This included the CAO meeting with a senior representative from the Squamish Nation Marine Group. The nation has 2 offers for the dock and remains interested in selling the dock to SCRD. Based on the limited information available about the sale process and timeline and about the condition of the dock, staff suggests that if the regional district was to take a more active role, one approach would be to seek an agreement to work with the nation or the nation's marine group on a strategy for new ownership that enables public access. With such an agreement in place, new resources would be needed to complete this one-time planning work. Staff are cautious to note that such involvement does not raise expectations of future SCRD ownership of the dock. Alternatively, as noted in the report, SCRD could do nothing, taking a more passive approach and seeing how a presumably private owner seeks to operate the dock in compliance with the official community plan and zoning. Staff are seeking direction on this in advance of the 2021 budget process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director McMahon.
Oh, I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button here. I just wanted to say that I realize that this dock is really important. And so I support us working towards finding a solution for public access for this dock, to be secured for the future. I do have other concerns about docks and the cost of docks. I was particularly taken by the sentence on page 21 that said the SCRD is one major storm away from potentially significant financial challenges associated with our 9 docks. I don't take that lightly, and I think that we really have to take a look at how sustainable these docks are. I believe there was a 10-year docks plan that is almost at the end of its time, and the situation is getting a lot more urgent, so I think we need to review this. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with everything that Director McMahon said, and I think the most optimal situation would be that possibly a private owner would be there that ensures public access. I think that would sort of, but I think we need to be involved in the discussion and guide it to some extent. So I do want the SCRD to be part of it. If we, for whatever reason, do end up taking it over, I do want to both float the idea of reducing the number of dock facilities on Gambier Island to maybe 2, however they will look. And so decommissioning, I'm not sure how many there are right now, but decommissioning so that we have 1 and 1 backup rather than however many there are right now, or some sort of revenue creation from the use of those docks, whether it be through moorage fees or taking in some sort of admission fees for people using the facilities. And then there's also the I think that goes in with what Director McMahon said, making sure that the facilities are set up for long-term success without having Union steamship docks that need to be maintained when they're not really needed. So whether we modify things to just have a ramp and a small dock for people to moor on, and getting rid of the big ones. I think we need to make sure that our dock facilities are made to be good for the long term, rather than trying to keep on putting patches on or putting band-aids on a situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ties. I did have one quick question for GM Hall. Director McMahon mentioned a docks master plan that is nearing the end of its 10-year lifespan, whatever you might want to call it. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to that, like when it was created, what its time window was. Was it a 10-year window? Is it 10 years old? Is it 20 years old? And yeah.
Absolutely, Chair. So in January of 2017, staff prepared a preliminary capital plan for SCRD docks. And if I recall correctly, it was built on a detailed asset management plan for about half of the docks and just extrapolated to the others. And a 10-year forecast was developed for capital requirements, and investments are being made following that plan to this day, supplemented by grant support when we can recruit it, and work to refine and fully build out that capital plan is underway by the asset management division. Thanks.
Thank you. So it is a capital oriented plan then. Okay.
Yes, Chair. It's, I believe, $315,000 invested on average. Not that that amount is spent every year, but that's the average annual requirement forecast over the next 10 years. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, staff, for the report. It's I would say it's the most factual, up-to-date aspect of putting all the bits and pieces of New Brighton into one place. So I really thank you for that. And the recommendations, I think, are a reasonable, good step as staff has proposed. I'm just going to make a comment on what Director McMahon said. This 10-year window, if I remember, it was in 2011 that the board essentially says, we don't want to look at this for another 10 years. Divestiture, new docks, anything. So it was a, it's not, I think it's just a resolution, right? It was a struggle to get there from 2000 to 2011, and we want to let it rest for 10 years, and then 10 years happens to be 2021. So I think that's the 10-year window. It's this managing expectations is one of the things that I'm really interested in. And for me, it's about keeping an open mind about what the possibilities of this facility are. A mix of all the parties. There's a so that's what I'm looking forward to, is what could it be? Because the constituents there, I think, feel that a publicly operated, property tax funded facility is like almost bulletproof, compared to the market conditions and things. So I think that's the expectation of property tax funded, publicly operated is the most secure for the future. I don't know if that's true or not. So I think that's for me is keeping an open mind about how to do this. Because ultimately there has been mention about a marine transportation strategy involving boat ramps and all this stuff, looking way down the line. But at this point, it looks good to me. So thanks again, staff, for the recommendations and advice.
Thank you, Director Hiltz. Director McMahon.
Yes, that is, Director Hiltz is remembering what I'm remembering. I believe there was a review of the ports back around 2010, and then there was a lot of wrangling about who was going to pay for them and how, and everybody got so tired of the discussion they eventually drove a stake through its heart for 10 years, which is probably a good way to go. So, but we are now at the point where we really have to review this. It's become important. So, thanks.
Thank you, Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'm just following up on Director Hiltz's comment about community expectations. On page 23 in the report, second bullet, staff have recognized, right, that the involvement in research and planning may lead to a community expectation of the regional district assuming an ongoing role. And that would need to be managed through education and communication. Just because as a regional district, we're stepping up and saying, we're willing to work with this, see what we can put together, or how we can see it potentially moving forward, does not necessarily mean that the regional district would take over the dock or have an ongoing role in it. And that staff have, as I said, staff identified that and will be very clear about putting that forward to the community. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I see no further hands up. This is the ports function, so that's areas B, D, E, and F. So if there are no further questions, I would love for somebody to move some recommendations or suggest some alternate Director Hiltz.
I'm getting my virtual hand and real hand kind of mixed up here, but yes, I would like to move the recommendations as presented by staff on, that is page 19 of Annex D.
And I see a seconder for that. Thank you very much. Seeing no hands up, I will go call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. It is currently 10:55. Would directors like a 5-minute break before we move on? Or since we've got Chief Michael here, do we want to do Chief Michael and then take a 10-minute break? Oh, okay, I see some thumbs up. So, okay, we will move on to Annex E. Gibson's a district fire protection 5-year capital plan. Chief Michael, welcome.
Chair, thank you. I'll try to be brief for you. The SRD board asked for a report on the potential effects of capital purchases, 2021 proposed initiatives and budget proposals for the fire department, and the risks of deferral to 2022. The report focuses and summarizes the financial impacts to the capital reserves before heading into the round 1 budget. Each project has its own financial requirement and or risks, and collectively they make an impact to the overall plan. In reviewing this, utilizing short-term borrowing for a future engine replacement scheduled for 2022 will relieve some stress from reserves and support the financial requirements for the proposed 2021 projects. Additionally, we will continue to seek out grants to assist funding these projects. However, these funding streams are not guaranteed. It has been omitted from this report, but I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee here.
Thank you very much for that. Directors, Any questions? Director McMahon.
Yeah, hi. Great to see the truck being refurbished. We like that. Reuse before recycle. The trailer at the fire commission meeting, we raised the possibility of alternate sources of funding for that trailer, such as approaching Rotary to see if they would be interested in funding it. Did you look into alternate funding for that trailer?
I have not approached Rotary at this time. I have looked into several grants to see what would be applicable for this type of project, coming up empty-handed at this point. But Rotary is not one that I've approached at this time.
Thank you. Director Beamish.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for your presentation, Chief Michaels. I support your recommendations and moving forward on this, but I'd also like to point out to the board that tomorrow at 11 o'clock, the Mayor Dugas of Port Hardy has organized a meeting for small communities, and specifically on the issue of funding, provincial funding for emergency equipment and facilities, fire equipment and facilities. And they're focusing on that. I'll just read a sentence out of a draft letter to the minister. It says, through the insurance premium tax, the province has collected 4.4% tax revenue through residential, commercial fire insurance and automobile insurance since 1921. We now believe that goes in the government general revenue fund. The estimated revenue collected is in hundreds of millions annually, and we're asking for some of this revenue to be available through grant programs or another form of assistance to support our communities as we can provide affordable, reliable, and sustainable fire protection services for our residents and businesses. So this has been an initiative of UBCM and for years, and Mayor Dugas has called a meeting tomorrow to discuss this with small communities. So I know that Councillor Kroll, who sits on the Fire Commission, will be attending that meeting. I'll attend that meeting if I'm available to do that. But it does certainly expose the fact that all of our communities, that funding for this kind of equipment is critical and needs to be funded through some sort of provincial process and reliable grant process. I'll also be speaking to the Rotary Club tonight, and I will leave with them the idea that maybe there's another opportunity for them to consider for as a project, because they're always looking for projects, those guys. It's great to see. So thank you for that. And I'd be prepared to move the recommendations on this at this time.
All right. And I have a seconder. Thank you very much. Director Ties, did you?
Yeah, and this may be akin to shooting myself in the foot, but I'm wondering if the hazmat trailer could also be supported by Area D, and it'd be sort of a joint asset, because I don't think we have a lot of hazardous materials in Roberts Creek. We don't have any gas stations. I hope we don't have any meth labs, but who knows? I think it, and I know that through I know there's agreements in place to share assets anyways, but I think maybe Area D could also support it.
Chief Michael.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was actually talking about this with my deputy, and we were hoping that Roberts Creek could fund all of it. We'd be very appreciative. But in all truthfulness, we feel that this would be a great asset to be solely owned and operated and maintained by the Gibson's Fire Department. There are provisions in our mutual aid agreement where if it was required, we could lend it out, we could bring it, and we could have some the appropriate fire department paying to replenish supplies. This really is intended for the arena and the pool at this time. That was our sole focus moving forward with this type of project. and it will have better capabilities. And we like the idea that we can transport it up and down the coast and assist our mutual aid partners. But through the mutual aid agreement, there are provisions that would allow the appropriate cost recovery if it was utilized.
Thank you. Director Seegers, I had seen your, okay, all right. I don't see any further hands up, so I will call the question. Oh, Director Hiltz.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I'm supportive of the regulations. It was the my attention was caught by the arena and the pool and the hazardous materials. And is this the ammonia, or what is it about? Was this part of the getting through that whole ammonia crisis to have this hazardous material trailer available? Is that where it stems from? Is the Fernie incident?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is really where it started coming to fruition, where there is a requirement to have a rescue plan and procedures in place, which really stemmed from the Fernie incident. We really appreciate our relationships that we have, and we were able to rely on Seashell to bridge a gap, and they offered to come and be that primary responder if required, with the expectation that we would be able to get our feet underneath us here. And so we feel we've done that now, but we still have the ability to rely on our mutual aid partners for support. But we're really looking to enhance that hazardous materials program and become that primary responder in our jurisdiction.
Great. Thank you very much for that. I see no further hands, so I'll try this again. Voting is EF in the town of Gibsons. All those in favor of the recommendations? That's carried. Thank you very much. It is 11:02. We will take a break to 11:15, and we will see you all back here. And welcome back, everybody, to our Planning and Community Development Committee meeting of January 21st, 2021. Next up on our agenda is Annex F, Planning and Community Development Department 2020 Q4 Year-End Report. So I'll turn this over to GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. This is just our regular report on activities for the fourth quarter and year-end, and staff are prepared to do our best to answer any questions that the directors might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have already received it for information. So directors, do you have any questions, comments, thoughts? Director Beamish.
Yeah, it's just on the Gibson's pool. I've had a number of inquiries from this end about longer hours and the plans for that, when it's going to be made available for longer hours. So I don't know if there's any status update that has been looked at.
GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize. I don't have information, but I will say that staff have heard the same thing. Thank you.
I think when we talked about it before, it was largely around recruitment and making sure that we've got the staff resources to adequately cover the hours that we're open for. So if you know of anybody looking for a job in the Gibson's pool, send them our way. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, staff, for the report. Yeah, I got 3 questions, so I'll go one first, right? Okay, if that's, and then we'll circle around. Okay.
I don't see any other hands, so it's all you, buddy.
Okay, all right. Page 37 about POMO and orientation materials, and just wondering about the non-POMO people having access to the orientation materials. I'm thinking it may be of use for people interested in a New Brighton dock and all kinds of things to understand how what POMO is presented with in their orientation. So is it available at this point in time?
GM Hall.
Thank you for the question, Director and Chair. And I did a quick review, knowing your question was coming, Director. I think about 90% of the orientation material is on our port's webpage, but we provide a comprehensive physical copy of all of that information. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any further hands up. So Director Hiltz.
Just to follow up, it was, I'm still, there was kind of the terminology of ports, you know, all those pieces got names to them. It's like looking at your skeleton, every bone in those structures. So that's kind of the material that is, and I haven't been able to find that. So that's the piece that how to name the bones of a port, I guess, is that's the piece that I've been looking for. I can keep going on to another question if that's all right.
I don't see any other hands up, so go ahead.
Oh boy, thanks. I got to get back to my page here. Page 38, it's about the facility services division and the, I just don't really know what buildings are in that service. Like, how does it work? Like wastewater plants, if their toilet is plugged, do they call this division? Who does what? I'm just trying to understand how it's kind of divided up.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So our building maintenance team supports all SCRD facilities and they offer a range of services: preventative maintenance, one-off tickets, and emergency response. And I would just anecdotally guess that they have touched almost every building we own, if not every building we own over the years. But they have preventative maintenance responsibilities for a wide range, quite a number of parks buildings, our Field Road building, some of the buildings at Mason Road, and they coordinate or cooperate with other facility managers to fill gaps, address those one-off tickets, or provide emergency response for the other facilities. And in terms of how the service works, it's a recovery basis where services So parks, for example, will buy building maintenance service internally, so that only the services that are actually receiving service pay for their work. Thanks.
I've just got a quick follow-up question to that then. Excuse me. Is that because it's on a cost recovery basis? I imagine building services can somewhat guess or budget at what they might want, but is there a reconciliation done and an adjustment at year end on whether the park service used 15% more time than it had budgeted for and wastewater used less? Just is there year end adjustments that happen around that?
Thanks for the question. There aren't budget adjustments required because of ongoing budget management. So any work that is done is pre-approved and there's budget available. But on an annual basis, staff do review where the service is needed to ensure that we have the resources to supply the demand that's there. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. Bottom of page 38 talks about the Sunshine Coast Arena, I guess it would be Sunshine Coast Arena, SCA. And it says that the ice plant upgrade was completed on time. The plant's operating. Ice install is underway. Any idea when ice is going to be available to the community, or is it already? Just looking at timing.
I had that question for later in our agenda. So GM Home.
It's here. That's what I thought. I know it comes up later, so we address it now.
I'm pleased to say that ice is in, and we've got skates on ice.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Jerry. I'm going to continue to follow up on that preventative maintenance. So the schedule is there for building. So, and it's a pay for service. So where does the responsibility lie that the preventative maintenance is actually done? That it's that the objectives are achieved. Where does that lie? Is it like a per building? Something like that.
Go ahead.
Thanks. So preventative maintenance programs are building specific, and they're created through an audit process and follow industry best practice. And then a checklist and a schedule is developed, and regular visits, quarterly or monthly, depending on the nature of the work, are planned. And there are a number of checks and balances through the year to ensure that the work is done, documentation is filed, etc. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Yes, thank you. On page 33, there's a chart on email public inquiries, and it's a rather alarming increase. Is that overall a problem? In that I suspect quite a few of them would have been in person pre-COVID. Do we know if it's just actually that bad?
Is it an overall increase in workload, or is it just shifting from in-person service delivery to electronic service delivery?
Yes.
GM Hall.
Thank you for the question. It's both. It's been an extremely busy year for both and especially the latter two quarters for both of our planning and building divisions. And I can't exactly speculate on what things would have been like if we had more in-person service, but considering we're accepting building permit applications in person safely, and we still are offering counter service on a limited basis for planning, and both of those are busy, I suspect it's just an overall uptick. Staff are doing what we can to triage and manage work so that everything proceeds on a timely basis. And we've recently introduced some process improvements to how inquiries come in and how they're tracked to ensure that nothing gets missed and ensure that we can be as responsive as possible. And we're looking forward to developing time standards for our services as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I'm just throwing out a suggestion here. We have quite a few services available online now, and more coming online. And there's a lot you can do with our mapping system, for instance. So any opportunities for little webinars or something for the public to help people, understand and use these services, because they really are terrific. And I myself use our mapping service a lot. I don't use it very well, though, because I don't understand it very well. And I would really appreciate some tips and tricks for how to get more out of the materials that we have online, and it helps our customers help themselves rather than have to ask so many questions. So just a suggestion.
Thank you. And unfortunately, some of those tools are not well suited to mobile phone use because I've tried using our GIS on the mobile phone, and it's not a fun experience. But Director Seegers.
Thank you. I know we've said this before, particularly to you and to your staff, but I think it merits saying again. We get a public health order, and we have an impact, but not like it impacts you and your staff who work particularly in recreation. They have to, on a dime, change processes, change procedures, incorporate new practices. And I think on behalf of the community, obviously they're appreciating what's happening because they are, using the facilities. But I want to thank you for the work that you guys are doing behind the scenes. It is very much appreciated and recognized by the board and the community. So please pass that on to the people you work with. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This question kind of touches on a couple places. It's about ice. Recently, in the news, it has been about COVID transmission in ice arenas, that if you want to create a place where COVID can transmit, you put it on a cold surface with limited air conditioning where people are huffing and puffing and hitting each other. Which I didn't really know that it was like, I didn't know this is what but it's been in the news recently. So I'm just wondering if staff can comment on how it applies to our situation. We have one old arena and one newer arena, how air moves around, if they have any comments on that.
Jim Hall.
Thank you for the question. So staff are aware of, and certainly we're interested readers of new information that's coming out about public health. I'll say that the regional district follows all orders and advice that we receive. And when it comes to ice, that's coming from the Center for Disease Control. It's coming from the BC Recreation and Parks Association, and it's coming from Via Sport. And that advice is certainly not static. It evolves as we learn more. And I would point out that under the latest order, there's no hitting each other on the ice because there's no contact. And quite recently, the distancing requirement for players or practicers on ice on the field of play, as it's referred to, was increased to 3 meters. And so that necessitates an update to our signage and safety plans and to the safety plans of all the user groups. So there is that, as Director Seegers mentioned, a turn on a dime. We continue to do that to make sure that all of our staff, our facilities, and our user groups are up to date as much as they can. And we're prepared to keep doing that to protect safety on the basis of the best information available. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I think we can move on to item 9, which was a late report to come forward. Community Recreation Facilities 2021 Financial Outlook and COVID-19 Implications. So who would like to speak to this? Ms. Perot.
Yes, thank you, Chair Toth. So recreation continues to be one of the most affected services as a result of COVID-19. Despite the pandemic, demand for services remains strong. Both staff and the community, as just recently mentioned, has adapted exceptionally well to the changing provincial health orders. Due to the positive user response and proactive fiscal management, there is a modest year-end surplus for 2020, although a deficit was initially projected. So that's great news. So based on the board directed services or service level for 2021, staff have undertaken a financial review of the recreation services in preparation of the budget. Recognizing there continues to be many unknowns, options to amend the financial plan have been provided. These include a reduction to user fee revenue with shortfalls recovered through property taxation, a reduction to the capital renewal funding of $500,000, which was first presented last September, which is now not required to cover the 2020 deficit, a temporary deferral of user fee contribution to the capital renewal fund, and a one-time base budget reduction. Also included in this report are other items for the committee's consideration, and staff may bring this information back if directed. Thank you, and staff are available for any questions.
All right. Thank you very much. Directors. Director Lee.
Yes, thank you. I'm just curious about the comment of going to parcel taxes versus property taxation. I was wondering why that would be important to do.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So included in the report, staff are still undergoing the legislative requirements within the community recreation bylaw to allow us to do that. Last fall, what we did is we realigned our financial sustainability policy to say that capital renewal would be funded through our parcel tax versus property taxation, just to make sure there's clear transparency as far as what is funded for operations and what is capital renewal. So currently in the community recreation budget, capital renewal is funded through property taxation. So it would make sure we align that. But there's a few steps within our bylaws that are required based on how the community recreation bylaw is established right now.
So this would be to more bring recreation capital in line with the way we're doing water and wastewater operations. Okay, or capital, excuse me. All right, thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I sent out an email to the directors. I also have talked with staff about a line on page 49E. Now, first I want to say I understand why we're not using COVID money for recreation. And I know that staff will be looking at, how they can best use the funds to, leverage them as much as possible. But I took exception to the line under provincial COVID-19 restart funding, where it said the rationale was that this was a function with member municipal participants. As I read the funding announcement and the letter that we got from the province, I believe the funding is for all regional district residents. There is a little more given as well on top as a top up for the rural residents, given the function or the services that are provided by the regional district. But I would not like to see COVID-19 money be determined to be spent on functions and services based on whether or not member municipal participants are part of that function. I don't believe staff are going there, but I just wanted to raise that. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, in looking at the procedure to switch to parcel taxes, on page 49B, it says staff are investigating the legislative, procedural, and financial implications. I've raised this before. I'm really concerned about the social equity piece of this. And we need to factor this in when we are making decisions. And I think we need to figure out how to do that, because we don't have the data we need to know the impact of our decisions on different populations on the Sunshine Coast, and that's concerning. I do know, however, that parcel tax is a flat fee. So if you have a $5 million mansion, you don't pay any more than the person who has parked an RV on their property and is living in it. And that fundamentally, I have a problem with, especially as concerns recreation. When it comes to a parcel tax for water, that tax is paying for the physical services to your property. And that makes sense to me as a parcel tax. And the same thing applies to the sewer, physical assets. But recreation is not directly servicing your property. You may or may not be using it. And there's no income test on this. So it's spreading recreation costs across people who may not be using the recreation facilities and can't afford it. So I have a lot of concerns about parcel taxes versus general property taxes. And property taxes are another issue too, because they also are not income tested, but there's more opportunity for an equity piece in there.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Beamish.
Yeah, I had a question as well on the using the frontage tax. I haven't had a chance to test that with our own finance because we use that in a very limited way, frontage tax. So that I'm not sure that that recreation, but I will defer to the legislation. Obviously, if it is possible to do frontage tax, to certainly take a look at the implications of that. And just following up with what Mayor Seegers had said, is that it is very interesting reading. If you go on to the provincial government website on the COVID restart funds, you will see the actual, there's actually a very good facts on there sheet that talks about how those funds are to be used, as well as the transmittal letters both to the municipalities and to the regional districts. So you can see kind of what and they are different. They are different letters, and it's worth taking a look at and see how they're used. But I note under there that part of the regional district funds was an allocation of, I think it's $3.50 per municipal population. It's so that we are part of that. It's not a big part, as I say, for the town of Gibsons, that would be about $15,000 or a little bit more, given that we have 4,999 population and people are there for the census. So that it just is interesting that we'll just want to make sure that we are not treated differently on those aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
I printed this report because I needed to be able to go back and forth. As soon as you get into dollars and money and whatever, and I have to be able to follow where the numbers go. So I followed page 49C, where we've got the shortfall being funded through property taxation. 49D, where we've got the 500,000 reduction to the reserve fund, and then the 89,600, sorry, and then also the 88,741. So on page 49F, I can follow all of that. Operating expenses, I showed the 88,741, and then the transfer to the reserve fund was the reduction of the 589,598. What I don't know is what is other? We've got 342,262 in other. What is other?
Tina?
Sorry, just a lot of buttons. The other is actually for the MFA debenture debt. So this just is trying to align balancing the financial statements and the budget. So that has to do with the debenture debt for the facilities. And if I could, Chair, to just make a comment regarding the parcel tax, staff recognized that was a proposal done last fall, and there's a lot more to be presented on that particular topic, including quite detailed financial analysis on what the implications to various property owners would be.
Okay, and then I just follow up to the table on page 49F.
Go ahead.
So with all the changes that staff have proposed, yes, there will be an increase to property taxes, but if you look at the bottom of that table, it's indicating for the average residential homeowner, it would be an increase of $35.91 for the year. Okay, so I just wanted to point that number out.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Okay, I just wanted to go briefly back to the provincial funding for Restart, because it's generating a great deal of comment with the Rural Directors Forum of UBCM, and I certainly see why. And I just wanted to remind people that the town of Gibson's received approximately $300 per capita from the province. The district of Sechelt got approximately $250 per capita, and the SCRD got $35 per capita. And I have a hard time seeing that being, you know, a reflection of the needs or the costs. So it's certainly a generating conversation, and I think there'll be, you know, some motions coming out of the upcoming Rural Directors Forum to go to UBCM on this topic. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Muted. I have to unmute myself. Are you also including the $814,614 that the regional district got for transit as part of those restart funds when you're doing those calculations? That seems to be a number that's not included most times when, right, when regional districts are looking at that. So that needs to be included as well. Then the numbers come out a little better. Mm-hmm. This is, okay, so what I said in my email to directors, I know that this is a touchy subject for some people. I think we need to have a further conversation, but probably now is not the time. And we can look at when we can do that.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
So the transit funds are a completely different pot of money, and yes, they are part of a transit restart. It's completely different than the COVID restart fundings that municipalities and regional districts are getting. And Director McMahon has a good point. This is a really hot button issue across the province with rural directors right now. And I have no problem with using funds that member municipalities or using our COVID funds for services that member municipalities pay into. But I want to be really careful about the dialogue that we are having right now, because it's going counter to the collaborative nature that we're trying to build. The reality is municipalities were funded more than regional districts were. And the regional districts across the province, we don't have any one size fits all. We're so far different than the way the municipalities run. And we see that here on the Sunshine Coast, where here we are at the regional district, where our budget is at least twice the size of the district of Sechelt. And the district of Sechelt received 5 times the funding that we did. And even the town of Gibson's received 3 times the funding that we did. And the only reasoning we can get back from the province on this is because the municipalities had to pay that money to regional districts in order to keep regional districts solvent. So as Director Seeger said, this probably isn't the time and place to get into it, but we also have a proposal in front of staff in front of us right now in the staff report about not using those COVID restart funds and coming from taxation. And so to bring us back to that, in order to offset the revenues and bring them from taxation, I'm really not in favor of that. I would prefer using COVID restart funds if we could for that. It's really, it's a huge sum of money to be asking residents to be paying through property taxation at this time. So I know we're at a really difficult place right now, but at the same time, I think there's also an advocacy piece here and more information that we need from the province. And I think more information will be coming from staff in the weeks ahead as they delve down into this. But I'll go back to Director McMahon's comments. Like this is a hot button issue across the province for all regional districts, because rural areas really feel quite passed over in how the funding was laid out.
Thank you. Director Beamish.
Yeah, just confirm too that on Tuesday night, our council passed a resolution to establish a COVID restart fund for the community. And we have set aside right now $25,000 initially for that purpose, allowing up to $1,000 per application to be administered strictly by staff. And we are reaching out to include the library and the fire department in that application process. So if they have restart fund costs that they want to apply for that $1,000 for, we're not looking at jurisdiction. We're looking at saying, hey, you provided a fund services for vulnerable people in our community. You're eligible for applying to our staff for that money. It's our staff who administrator. It's not a bureaucratic process, and we'll just put it out there. We will increase that fund if necessary.
Thank you. Tina, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention, as is on page 49F, is the essential increase to property taxation due to these cumulative recommendations. So it's the 4 right now. And the essential property taxation from the current budget would be about $198,000, so just under $200,000. So the reason why we bring this here is because what we'd like to do is start off at round 1 with at least a reasonable standing point from what we can estimate taxation to be. And so that's the essential impact with these various changes. So I know the first recommendation is quite alarming because it looks like it's 800,000. So I just wanted to clarify that. This recommendation is just making sure that we keep track of the various inputs that need to be done, just from a transparency perspective. So it's not an $800,000 income increase. It would be less than 200,000. So overall, that's less than a 1% tax increase to the regional district, understanding that regional recreation is only recovered through improvements only. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. The other part about the restart funds, I appreciate the dialogue, and of course at round 1 budget, we did at the December report say we were going to bring forward some proposals for some of those funds. And so the committee or the board will see some of those during the round 1 deliberations. And the way staff have focused on those, as outlined in the report, are where can we get the most corporate overall everybody benefit for those particular funds. And then one of the other things in the report is what was mentioned in December was whether or not some of the member municipalities wanted to maybe transfer some of their restart funds to funding shortfalls such as recreation. But I just wanted to let the committee know that the corporate officer and I have kind of flagged that we should talk to the ministry about how some of those logistics would need to happen, because our bylaws are explicit on apportionment. So if we deviate from that, is there any concern? So those would be some of the things that if the board wanted us to further explore some things, we just have to come back with some of those pieces.
Thank you for that. Indeed, reading the report, that number was quite alarming to read. And, you know, it's only when you look at the overall increase that it starts to be, okay, this is reasonable and manageable. Director Seegers, you're muted.
I got 3 screens now, and I got to figure out which one I want. Okay. I like staff's recommendations. I don't like the fact that we have to go to the community, and it's a result of how we have to provide services. And there is a cost to that. So I think there are other places that the COVID money can be used. And I think staff are looking at that. As I said, they're going to be coming forward with that. The regional district has had costs for plexiglass, for you know, all kinds of different things that will get more of a bang for the buck kind of thing with the COVID money. And I trust them to do that kind of work. So if they are finding that and working on that and came forward with these recommendations, I'm fully in support of the recommendations as they are, and that the COVID money be used in other places.
Is that you moving those recommendations, Director Seegers?
I will move those recommendations as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for those? Seconded. Thank you. Director Beamish?
Sorry, I didn't actually realize that's where my cursor fell.
Okay. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I'm happy to move this along into the budget process. And then if we want to get, you know, dig into the details and argue about it, then that would be the more appropriate time. I'm just going to reiterate that when the province puts a lot of restrictions on the funding to regional districts, it makes our lives particularly difficult because regional districts are so inflexible in our budgeting processes. You know, municipalities are able to move money around much more freely, and it makes it difficult. So not happy, but I'll go tell all my colleagues at UBCM about how unhappy I am. Thanks.
I've actually got a question for you, Director McMahon, through the Rural Directors Forum. Are they looking at yes, we recognize that this is not good, we're unhappy with this, you know, should the province decide they need to do this again for whatever reason in the future, you know, are they looking at alternate methods of determining how regional districts should receive apportionment, whether it is partly population, partly service, partly, you know, whatever? Just wondering if that's part of that dialogue that they're having.
I think everybody's at the wailing indignation stage right now, but I recognize that you're right, because the more I learn about regional districts, the more I appreciate how everyone is unique and the circumstances are so different that just a one-size-fits-all formula doesn't really work. So they do need a better approach, and perhaps we can move that conversation in that direction, or even, you know, throw together a working committee of regional districts to look at that and look for a fairer formula. Good idea.
All right. Director Pratt.
Being still at the wailing and indignation stage myself of the process, it's you know, it's hard to figure out which way goes forward, but it does sound like through the UBCM group that they're trying to gather a lot of information and see what to go forward. I'm okay with supporting the recommendation and further debating it through the budgeting process and doing more hand railing and ringing and everything at that point. And hopefully we can have more information and would be most advantageous if the rural directors manage to be successful in getting more funding through some, you know, some golden pot of money from the province for a safe restart. But we know that's highly unlikely. So,
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I mean, if the province wants to give the regional district more money, I'm all in favor of that. I mean, we are members, even though we're from the municipality, but we're members of the regional district. We see the financial impact, and the financial impact is to everybody on the Sunshine Coast. So do I think it was fair the way it was done? No. And I'm just saying, when we're looking at spending this, we shouldn't have that as a criteria for determining where the funds go. That's all I'm saying. Okay. More money, yes.
I would suggest right before I call the vote, so nobody else can debate me on it, that perhaps the municipalities were given too much money. More should have been apportioned to the regional districts, given that municipalities were required to move on funds and things like that. But we really didn't see the impacts that we thought we were going to see right across the board. So they should have been much more evenly distributed across the board. But anyways, moving on. Voting is B, D, E, F, Seashell, Town of Gibsons, and SIGD. All those in favor of the recommendations? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to our communications. Annexes G, H, I, J, and K. Is there anything in there that anybody would like to flag? I did see the 2 letters from the ICE users groups, and I thank GM Hall for that update that the ice is in. We've got skates on the ice, so that's good news. Director Ties.
I believe the letter regarding fisheries is asking for a letter of support. I'm wondering if we should make a motion in that regard. The letter of support we sent to the addressees listed on the letter of request there.
Is that a motion, Director Ties?
Sure, I'll make that motion.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. Director McMahon, is your hand up to speak to this, or go ahead?
Yes, Director Ties got to it first. I was just wondering if there was any comments from any of the other directors who have more fisheries, like maybe Area A, on this particular topic. Thanks.
Director Lee.
This is something that, well, thank you, Chair. This is something that's been a long-term discussion amongst the fishermen here. And they're by and large in agreement with what's proposed. So I'm all for a letter of support.
All right, thank you. Director Hiltz.
To tell you the truth, I feel like a bit of a fish out of the water on this one, because I started looking at the report and I'm going, there's a lot in it. And I'm going, is this in our lane? The letter of support, yeah, but I don't know the implications of it. And there's just a lot behind it. The province hasn't kind of weighed into it yet, so I'm not sure where it is. So I'm reluctant to support it because of not knowing what it's about.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. Oh, Director Ties.
I just wanted to say that I think ultimately we're looking to put fisheries back to the locals rather than large corporations, and I don't think there's I don't think there's anything speaking against it. I do see Director Hiltz's argument, but I think in principle I agree with the notion of what's being presented there.
Okay. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of sending a letter of support? All right. Any opposed? Would you like that recorded, Director Hiltz? Okay. All right, that's carried. And anything else in the communications? Annex K. Oh, I've got all sorts of hands here. I'm going to say my piece first, and we'll see where it goes from there. Annex K caught my attention. You know, this has come to the District of Sechelt as well. I'm not sure what mechanism might exist or might possibly exist for us to assist with tracking people who may be in RVs or movable dwellings of whatever form. I was just wondering if our staff had any comment or thoughts. Sorry, GM Hall, I didn't warn you this question was coming, but you know, any thoughts would be appreciated.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Staff would just say that we we came to the same conclusion on reading this letter that that it sounds like you did, that we don't track this information, and we don't appear to have the capability built into any of our existing record keeping systems. It's not part of a service. Thanks.
For sure. Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. As a, I guess, a person on the, or in the group of the Sunshine Coast Homelessness Advisory Committee, this is something that comes up each time they go out to do a homeless count. And there are concerns with doing a point in time count for the homeless people on the Sunshine Coast. So basically they take a 24-hour period and try to reach everybody, but then they limit the areas that they can go, and it limits who we actually count. So while we did have an increase this last time, we requested to be able to do a count in Pender Harbor to address, you know, homeless up in that area. Homeless or precariously housed is what it is, right? And it was denied. So there has been talk about doing an extended count. So where we actually set aside a month, where in that month we get out into the community. There's all kinds of people who interact with, you know, some of the homeless, some of the people living in tents, some of the people who are accessing services from wherever they are living, to actually get a full picture and then be able to compare that to what the point in time count does, to give us a bigger picture, a more accurate picture of what the situation is here on the Sunshine Coast. Advocacy is happening around that. There's also conversation happening around that with regards to the Poverty Reduction Action report that's being put together under the grant that the District of Sechelt got through Community Services. So there is more work happening around this at this point. I can reach out to Nicole and connect her up with some of those other people so that she can get more information. She has reached out to planning, and what she's looking for here basically is, you know, as directors, if you know of someplace in your area where some of these people are living, she's just saying, you know, please give her information, and she's going to see about how to get that incorporated. It is a significant number of people on the Sunshine Coast. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I was a little confused by the letter. Like, it was an Indigenous liaison advisor talking about regional districts, electoral areas, and marginal dwellings, right? This idea, and I was kind of wondering. It seems to be more suitable to SIGD because that's where the census is trying to increase the data that comes from First Nations lands. As I was digging into, May 11th is Census Day this year, by the way. That's the day we're counting, and it's a census of population, right? There are other kinds of censuses, like a householder type of information. So for me, where it kind of started to come together with the SCRD is civic addressing, right? Because often the enumeration process needs someone to be at a civic address, and so that's the only place I kind of touched on it. But I was confused by the Indigenous liaison and rural electoral areas, and I was just kind of wondering. So Sechelt got it, but we don't know about SIGD, and so should this be referred to them, or is the assumption that the writer is reaching out to SIGD? Have they actually talked to them? And that's the only piece I could come up with, is that it seems to be not directly in SERD's lane in terms of its service delivery, as GM Hall said. We don't have that service.
Thank you, Director Hiltz. I don't know that anybody's going to know the answer to that question as to whether it was sent to the SIGD as well. I mean, certainly if you wanted to make a motion to forward it to the SIGD for referral, you could.
Seeing we don't have an SIGD person, I would suggest that we make sure that they do hear about it. So I would make the motion that this is referred to SIGD for information.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded. I don't see any hands up. All those in favor? All right, it's carried. Yeah, anything else that anybody wants to bring up? Director Lee.
I was trying to figure out just exactly what an Indigenous liaison program is. There's a lot of First Nations that are status living in our communities that are not necessarily members of a band. And so I suspect that she's representing all Indigenous members of the community. And that's why it says communities. So we shouldn't be jumping to conclusions here. But I'm okay with sending it to the band, the Seashell band, because of course that would be for sure the largest organization here with members that are Indigenous. But I think we still need to understand that perhaps someone like me does need to get a hold of her as well.
Right. Thank you, Director Lee. Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I should have asked staff about this, but census is every 5 years. Last one is 2016. Does the regional district get involved in any way in providing information? It's a federal matter, and we just does the regional district have any involvement in the census? That's a question.
GM Hall.
Thank you for the question. Not having been here for multiple censuses, I don't I don't have a comprehensive answer, but I will say prior to the last census, I think it was through Vancouver Coastal Health, we were advised of some specialty questions that were to be asked as part of the census, and asked if we had any comments. That's going back quite a number of years. I don't know if that happens every census or just sometimes. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Beamish.
Yeah, just on the point of the census, we have added a web page to our internet to our system, just informing people of the census and helping that way. But otherwise, in getting actively involved, not unless our planning staff provides information to them where they might look. On this issue of the RVs as permanent dwellings, I'm not sure that I think we're reading too much of this in terms of the Indigenous issue. I think it just may be the person who actually contacted us. My view, I'm not sure, forwarded it to the, I know I've voted in favor of forwarding it to the SIGD is not a necessary thing. It's on the agenda package. They get the agenda package as something. RVs as residents, permanent dwellings, exist in all of our communities. You see them sitting on the side of a house with power and stairs into them, and I just assume somebody's spending the night there when I see that sort of thing. And sometimes they just don't go away. So that it's not just people in the bush or people up in the end of the road. So there are people sitting on our residential properties living in RVs. Also, that is probably what they're trying to capture, is the amount of that that's going on. So I don't just see this as an issue for the band. I think it applies to all of us.
Thank you, Director Beamish. Unless they're urgently burning comments, I'd like us to move on because we do still have a closed portion here. So, Director McMahon, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the census questions are available online if anybody wants to go and take a look.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for the correspondence. We do have no new business on our agenda, but we do have an in-camera section. So I'd ask for a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with section 91A of the community charter. Personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Okay, and before we go in camera, I will ask if we've got any questions from our 2 attendees or if anybody emailed anything in. I see no hands up. So I will assume that means no questions. So thank you for being with us today. And we are going to go in camera. Does anybody need a stretch break before we go in camera? Or are we good? Only one item. All right, welcome back, everybody. And having concluded our in-camera session, we have one item left on our agenda, and that's a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? All right, thank you very much. We'll see you all later.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.